Everyone, I'm Alex O'Sullivan. I'm a freshman at Yale College, and I'm the youngest of three children from Washington, D.C. The real D.C., though, not Silver Spring, Maryland, or Northern Virginia. And as you'll see in a couple of minutes, hip hop is a really big thing to me. I'm a big hip hop fan, and it's pretty important to grasping what I was trying to accomplish with my final project. If anyone recognizes my sweatshirt, you'll see there's J. Cole here, Kendrick Lamar here, but you guys will see in a moment why hip hop was so important to grasping what I wanted to accomplish. So in our Justice and Society class, we were tasked with creating a personal assessment of the vitality of the community, of which we are a member, including the impact of the criminal legal systems on that community, as Professor Hinton said. And I think the most important and constant community in my life and for many African Americans historically is family. There's a long and pervasive history of institutional racism weaponizing the fracture and destruction of the Black family, from the slave trade to mass incarceration. And so in my final project, I examined the impact of the criminal legal system that it had on my family through the incarceration of one of my relatives. And I used poetry to capture the reverberating effects it had on all of us. So I wrote a 26-page poem, all my writing from my own perspective, but I also used my writing to try to capture the perspectives and voices of some of my family members as well. So now I'm going to share my screen and sort of start the presentation. I only am sharing some select lines and parts. I'm not sharing the entire thing. And I am only sharing this. I'm not sharing the entire 26-page poem. So, as I said, the biggest inspiration for my work was hip hop, and in particular, Kendrick Lamar. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big Kendrick Lamar fan. And so with that, I sort of wanted to really use his work to inspire me. And I think the biggest inspiration for how I went about my writing and why I decided to write a poem in particular was Kendrick Lamar and his most recent album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And I think what pulls me to Kendrick Lamar's music is really his storytelling. He tells stories of hope, love, pain, and liberation in ways which feel visceral and for me, like very cathartic. And there's one song in particular, Mother I Sober, where he details his own painful and difficult process towards transformation and healing from the trauma of his childhood. And that song instantly became sort of therapeutic for me and easily my favorite. So here are some of the lines, and this is the album cover for the album Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And you guys can feel free to sort of read the lines of the song Mother I Sober. I recommend it. It's a great listen. These are probably the most powerful moment in the song. And I think honestly, what made this moment so powerful, what makes him so powerful is that he uses art in a way that touches people. And his most recent album really resonated with me and ultimately inspired me to try and use art for my own personal healing, because this album was so important for his. And so when I was writing this piece, that objective of using my writing to help process a family trauma, which, you know, I sort of have long tried to maybe ignore, push to like the back of my mind and not really think about, that was really there. So that objective was in the back of my mind. And the soft instrumental, which Kendrick Lamar raps over on Mother I Sober, was sort of replaying through my head. So I recommend you guys listen to the song if you haven't already. And so now I'm going to start sharing a couple lines. I'm sharing sort of like 3 different sections, but obviously this is not representative of the entire work. It's 26 pages. I'm sharing about 3 pages. But as you can expect, sort of before I actually get into the lines themselves, whenever you're writing something so heavy and emotionally taxing, you know, it's really easy to experience writer's block. And I think that's something that I experienced at the beginning. The words didn't really come in sentences or chunks, just sort of like non sequitur phrases describing how I was feeling, my thought processes and things like that. So it was actually writing from the perspective of other members of my family that allowed me to actually process and really put to word my own emotions better. And I think I'm really glad the process happened like it did, because I felt like I was able to not overburden myself by trying to process my emotions too quickly and deeply. And in doing so, I was able to create something more creative and imaginative than I had first planned. And if you know Kendrick Lamar, you know he loves to sort of rap from other people's voices and perspectives. So yeah, so this first chunk of lines is sort of just dealing with, I'd say, the impact of the criminal legal system and the way it can feel like it fractures your connection to someone in your family. And when it happens, it sort of reverberates throughout, you know, everyone feels it. And when it first happened for me, I questioned a lot, including how things might change for all of us. And as a result, you know, it was unsettling, especially when you're hearing that news at like such a young age. It really takes something that's so beautiful and joyous, and it really makes you fear that it won't be beautiful and joyous anymore. And I think that's one of the more discreet ways that, you know, the criminal legal system can affect the minds and sort of the spirits of so many Black and brown people who, you know, feel the impact, who feel that contact with the criminal legal system. So I'll just give you guys a moment to read through these lines if you'd like. Awesome. So now I'm going to move on to the second chunk of lines. And these lines are really about sort of the adultification and criminality of Black youth. So 1 in 4 is a statistic that in reality is closer to 1 in 3, like meaning that 1 in 3 Black men will go to prison at some point in their lifetime. In my mind at the time when I was going through this, I think the statistics may have been 1 in 4, or I just had believed it was 1 in 4. So I wanted to stay true to that. And the fact that there were 4 Black boys in my grade at the time, it sort of made me sort of feel it in a more intimate way. And I think like these lines of poetry really capture the psychological distress and fear that contact with the criminal legal system can do. Sort of like the moment when the theory stops becoming theory and instead becomes real life, the very real fear that, you know, it could be you. You could be that statistic, you could be that number that takes far too many Black and brown people in our country. And so I think this was really just similar to the last theme of what it can do to you mentally, psychologically at a young age, having that contact with the criminal legal system and how it can make everything in life feel so trivial and small because of how real the threat is. And then lastly, this was sort of, I think, the lines that I thought could best represent my own growth and the importance of the process of healing and grief. It's hard, but it's necessary. And sometimes it takes years to fully work through, but it's something that has to be confronted. And when you don't confront it, it builds up and it manifests itself through undesirable emotions that are difficult to explain or understand. And this entire poem for me, in reaching this point of confronting my feelings, was really only possible through witnessing the love that all of my other family members practiced. You know, seeing how they rallied together through love allowed me to choose love, which sort of allowed me to reject some of those emotions, some of those, you know, fears and thoughts that come from from having a family member that has contact with the criminal legal system. So the power of art and creative self-expression can be a conduit, I think, for the deep feeling and processing of these emotions. And I think it breaks the cycle of silence. And this poem for me was a way to work through my grief in a way in which I really haven't before. But on that note, you know, grief is something that doesn't necessarily just happen once and you're done with and it's over. It's a process, you know, and same with the criminal legal system. It's not something that just happens and then, you know, everything is well for the rest of time. It's something that stays there, it lingers, but you have to find ways to work through it. And that's really what I thought I was able to do through this poem. And I think that's what art is so special at capturing. And so now coming back to the theme of our assignment, community vitality. My community was family, as I said. And what I found through both Lamar's words and my own words is that the moments that bring the most adversity in a family also have the potential to bring out the most powerful love and support from everyone. And ultimately dealing with these traumas through an ethic of love can bring the family closer together and strengthen its vitality. And it might seem small, but I think that's a powerful way to reclaim community when it's being threatened. I think that's very powerful resistance. And so the final lines on Mother I Sober, the second to last track on Mr. Brown, the Big Steppers, Kendrick Lamar's wife comes onto the track and says, "You did it, I'm proud of you. you broke a generational curse. Say, thank you, Dad. And then his son comes onto the track and says, thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Mommy. Thank you, brother. And so in this way, we sort of see how on Mother I Sober and how the entire album was like a therapeutic process of healing for Kendrick Lamar. And in doing so, he was able to really use that love that he had to draw out of himself. And in doing so, being able to strengthen his community, his family, and become a better father and become a better husband and person. And I think we're all the more grateful and appreciative for it. And I'm so appreciative of Kendrick Lamar and his album and his art. And I think I wouldn't have been able to reach this own point of self-expression without him. So thank you guys.